Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monika Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Astro Chat. In fact, the final Astro Chat of 2024 with myself, Kimberly Williams, and my amazing astrology cohorts, Anne Sundell and Monika Anna. And we're going to be talking about the upcoming new moon in Capricorn that is happening on December 30th at 4:26 p.m. here in Central Time Zone, USA. Across the pond in England, it'll be at 10:26 in the evening. And then over in Finland, it'll be on the early morning of the 31st at 12:26 a.m. We're looking at a new moon at 9 degrees of Capricorn. And we'll be talking not only about the moon itself, this lunation, but also about some of the interesting things happening between this new moon and the next full moon, which will be happening on January 13th. And before we launch into everything, I'd just like to take a little moment to segue. I didn't tell y'all about this, but this is our 3rd year anniversary. Woohoo! We actually started on the January 1st new moon 3 years ago. So yay! And thank you to all of our listeners and subscribers for tuning in and following along and joining the conversations.
I can't believe how quickly that has gone. Because the whole idea started at UAC 2018.
Yeah.
And then we were just chatting away, meeting up like we do here and just chatting away. And we thought, why won't we just record that? And I can't believe that it's already been 3 years.
And now we have UAC 2026 coming up.
I know.
So we better be there, I think.
Yeah. And hopefully
I am getting my tickets.
Ditto. And hopefully we'll get to actually meet some of the people who are following along on our podcast. That would be wonderful to see others there.
Amazing.
All right. We have a lot of exciting things to talk about. Just a quick summary of some of the ingresses that are happening during this time period. We may not dive into all of them, but this could be important to you if you know your chart. On the 3rd of January, Venus is going to be going into Pisces. That should just be lovely. And a few days later, on the 6th of January, that retrograde Mars is going to back up and re-enter Cancer, which may bring some challenges. On the 8th, Mercury will be entering Capricorn. And on the 11th, just before our next full moon, the nodal axis will shift from Aries, Libra, into the Virgo, Pisces. But we'll talk about bits of that later on. I think first, Anne, you are going to kick us off by talking about the Sabian symbol for this degree of Capricorn.
Yeah, thank you. This moon in Capricorn is 9 degrees and 43 seconds. So it means that I'm talking about the degree of 10, the Sabian symbol of 10 Capricorn, which is this time an albatross feeding from the hand of a sailor. And the keynote for this is the overcoming of fear and its rewards. And I think that this Sabian symbol can say something about, maybe about our expectations, maybe about how much we're actually willing to give out to the world. And there's an old Finnish saying that as you shout out, you will get the answer the same way. Somehow, I feel that this is like a balancing of the own limits or the own goals with what we are able to do actually and what is realistic. But I think it's a quite beautiful symbol this time. And it also says the man who radiates perfect harmlessness can call the wildest creatures to him and can establish with them a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding.
Beautiful symbol, isn't it? I love the idea that you attract something, that it's not you capturing something, it's not about you going after something. You're actually with your own being, with that shift within you, you can attract something that otherwise would be considered wildlife, the nature, the wild nature. It's not about taming nature necessarily. It's not about exploiting or exploring. It's about being who you are, like you say, in that harmony, and that attracts that albatross. Usually when you feed the bird, you have to have your palm of the hand up there and wait patiently for them to come over. You're not running around them trying to feed them not straight into their beaks. You're not trying to capture them by the wing and drag them to you. You're waiting in that kind of perfect harmony until they actually realize you're not a threat, realize the intention behind, and then they can come to you. It's a lovely symbol for this new moon in Capricorn, and also new moon so close to the new year.
Yeah, and it's not just any bird that's being fed, it's an albatross. And whenever I hear people talk about an albatross, I instantly go to the opening of Moby Dick. An albatross around my neck is hung. And this idea of how albatrosses are used a lot in poetry and literature to represent doom and dread, fate, fear. And we're not conquering our fear, right? We're feeding it out of our hand. It's like we are balanced, we are partnering, we are at peace. And I get the sense here that there's something about the overwhelm or the dread of all the work we have to do that's somehow we're satiated and it's okay. There's this moment of peace, of being in the moment and mindful with what we're doing. And I really like it. It is a beautiful symbol and something lovely to start the new year off with.
It is. And we're starting the new year with the new moon in Capricorn. Again, Capricorn, it's this time of the year when the sun is getting reborn. We have our winter solstice, which is the time when the sun moves into Capricorn, when we finally have that shortest day, longest night. And from that day forward, the light actually strengthens. There is this idea of a journey, of this really difficult journey out of the depth of the darkness of winter, of the darkness of, especially in the northern hemisphere where we all are based, towards the light, towards something positive, towards hope. I can quite imagine that idea of Capricorn and climbing a mountain. It's difficult, it's tiring, but you can see the peak, you can see where you're going. And I feel like with the winter solstice, the shift into Capricorn, we have that, we can see the spring there. You can taste the hope of spring, even though we just started winter. We're not there yet, but the shift is happening. The night has been overcome. Now we can actually look forward to longer days. We're still in the dark side of the year until spring equinox, when light and dark will balance and then the light will take over. But we can see that light actually growing and strengthening. And for me, the Capricorn and the new moon Capricorn is very much about that. It's very much about seeing that light. We had the Sagittarius, which we were talking about previously, the Sagittarius vision, the Sagittarius fire, the hope of that 2025 year that's about to come, and the dreams that we're dreaming in the depth of autumn and winter about what is it that we will do and achieve and enjoy and have fun with in 2025. And then Capricorn comes in and say, okay, to achieve all those dreams, what is my structure? What is that hard graph that I have to put in? What is that journey that I have to take? I always say that every end of the year, for me, I am very much a new moon planning, and not necessarily new moon, sorry, new year planning and new goal setting kind of person. And for me, this is the structure that carries me. And there's a difference between having a structure and having something that limits you. Structure should be there to support you, not to limit you. But using that vision of Sagittarian and using a Sagittarian vision and using that structure of Capricorn, the idea of commitment. No one said I'm going to run the marathon and then sat on a sofa and ate pizza and then run it with amazing time. You have to commit to something. If you have a goal, if you have a vision, if you have a dream, you commit to that. If your dream is to be the most amazing painter, you will be surrounded by painting. You will be looking at the landscape and see the colors and already knowing what you can bring when you come home to your canvas. And I think Capricorn for me is very much about commitment. And this new moon, we were looking at the chart before we started recording. This new moon doesn't really have aspects. It's just in and of itself is just new moon in Capricorn. Everything else speaks around it, but not necessarily to it. We had quite a few new moons and full moons when that conversation was there with Uranus, with Pluto, with this and that. This one is very much, I'm a new moon in Capricorn and I'm just here to stay. And I kind of like that everything else is just around it. But that lunation is, look at me, I'm a Capricorn, let's go with it.
I just think about, I feel about Capricorn, that Capricorn really, they make their own future. They're realistic enough to not depend on outer sources or on that things gonna get lucky or something like this. They just know what they need to do and then they do it. And nobody even knows.
Yeah.
And I think what I love the most about Capricorn is that its symbol is the sea goat. It isn't a goat. A goat could climb the mountains quickly, but a sea goat is, the front half is the goat, the back half is that sea serpent. And so we're having to drag that tail along. It can slow us down. And this, I think, is dynamic of Capricorn, is that we're looking at things that are the long term goal. What are we going to do over the long term? And how am I breaking that down into the actionable steps of how I'm going to get there? And knowing that we can't just race through can often lead us to feeling overwhelmed or feeling like things are enormous. And sometimes the mountain we want to climb is really a huge challenge. But we can do challenging things. And what I like is that it's a sea goat. There's always that, why am I pursuing it? What is the aspiration? Why do I want to get to the top of this mountain? And I feel like when we have that new moon in Capricorn every year, I'm not just setting my goals and my responsibilities and my tasks for the year, although I'm doing all that, but there's also that I'm remembering or I'm capturing the why I want to get there. It'd be very easy to look at the calendar and the list and the KPIs and be like, oh, this is too much. Let me just let some of that go. And what I often find is this is the time of year where I'm like, no, there has to be a way that I can make it happen. How am I going to do it? Because I'm very attached to and motivated by where I want to be this time next year. It's that ability to see the big picture, the long-term picture, that I think allows us to work with or at least tolerate those obstacles and the harshness and the when it's going to feel like an arduous journey. It's worth it to get to that mountaintop. And I'm a person who often struggles with my inner Saturn and Capricorn, but at this time of year, I really embrace it and wrap around it and appreciate that motivation to think think about what it is I want to create over the course of the coming year, and then how am I going to do it and break it down. There's a lot of dark, heavy things I could say about Capricorn, but on the new moon, I always feel like I'm going to the light.
You all know by now that I love Saturn. I think I'm probably more friends with Saturn than any other planet. I love what you said. I think Capricorn failure is when we haven't realized Sagittarius. Sagittarius is our why, Capricorn is our how. I'm not doing the hard graph for nothing. If I don't have the why, if I don't have the vision, if I don't have the passion of Sagittarius, the graph of Capricorn becomes, oh, do I have to? Why do I do that homework? Oh, do I have to go to work again? Yeah, because I want to get a nice car. I want to keep the roof over my head. I have to go to work kind of thing. But Sagittarius is that your why. It's like if you go up the mountain, it's very easy to say, do you know what? I don't want to do it. Let's just turn back. Let's go to the nearest pub. Let's just put the feet up. Sagittarius is the why. It's, you know what? No, that's the passion that I have. I want to see what's behind that mountain. I want to see the view on the top. I want to, I don't know, achieve the 3 peaks. In UK, we have a 3-peak challenge. Or I want to achieve all the 8, the crown of the earth, all the highest peak of the earth. Sagittarius is our why. If we bring our why into Capricorn, I feel like it's easier. When you go to the gym every day and you have your why, and your why is, you know what, actually going to the gym every day helps me stay healthy, both in my body and mentally. And I do think, Kimberly, you're absolutely right. Capricorn can be super heavy if it's not mixed with the previous sign. And this is what I always love the beauty of astrology, that every archetype is put in the right place for our understanding of the whole. And Capricorn, between that Sagittarius and Aquarius, again, it's a perfect position for it to be. We have our why, we have our how, and then we can see the vision of what that brings to, not just for us, but humanity, bigger circle, bigger picture.
But with this moon, particularly when it doesn't make so many aspects, and we're still having 4 flex planets in the chart, I think that it's still good to keep flexibility possible with the plans, because we're gonna have so much change the coming year, astrologically too, that we can have like plan 1, plan 2, backup 3, and stuff like this, because with that moon also, it usually craves attention when it's not expected. It needs to show itself without the help, but it might also be a bit more like stubborn by itself and take out the edges of Capricorn a bit, or how I should say it. So it might be good to let the plans still be a bit flexible, because there might be solutions that we can't see right now.
Good point.
I think the way I think about that, because that's such a point that comes up, especially in my corporate world as well. Where is the structure? Where is the agility? And especially in project management, you have those kind of two approach. And I was like, neither of them is good. You have to have both. You can't have only structure, because that becomes your prison. You can't have only agility, because that becomes chaos. And I think the key word for me, for Capricorn, is commitment. It's like going back to that Sabian symbol. I am committed to feed that albatross, to feed that fear, to look into that fear and be there in my authentic self. And I am committed. I am not creating a structure. And if I need to move a little bit to the sun, or if I need to move closer to the sea to see where the albatross is, or change the seats, I will do that. But the commitment to that cause is there. And I think this is sometimes when we forget, again, going back to that Sagittarius, I am committed to the vision, not to the steps. Steps can change, structure can change. It's the vision that I am committed to. Saturn says, okay, Sagittarius says, oh my God, we're going there. And Saturn says, great, I will commit to the vision that you pointed out. I will commit to that dream. And then let's have a look what we can do. And if it doesn't work, we will change that, because it's the how we are getting there. And I think, again, for me, it's really interesting that I sometimes feel about Capricorn, there's this element of religiousness in Capricorn, but that kind of fossilized religiousness, where you commit and see the symbol instead of what that symbol represents. And I think that's, again, between Sagittarius and Capricorn, we have that vision, that mystical experience in Sagittarius, in whatever religion you believe. And then, or it's that revelation that happens, right? And that's the Sagittarius. And then we organize a church, a group, a cult, whatever you want to call it, around that vision. And that fossilize. And then if you're not wearing blue, then you're not one of us. If you're not wearing a red or orange or purple robes, then we are not one of us. Then we concentrate on the steps. And I think that's where we fail with Capricorn. We concentrate on the steps instead of realizing that steps are a way of getting to that Sagittarian vision. That commitment is to Sagittarius to take us forward to Aquarius, not about how we're getting there. Thanks, Anne, for pointing that out. That's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to be reminded to have that flexibility and also to have the backup plan. To me, backup plans is a major key element of Capricorn energy, because we are committed to the vision, or what I like to think of with Capricorn is the mountaintop. I'm getting to the top of that mountain. And if you've ever done a climbing wall, you know that to get to the top, you may think from the bottom, I'm going to go this way. But halfway up the wall, those steps aren't going to work. Sometimes you have to go back down and find another way up. So it's the being committed to arriving at the top, not necessarily being committed to the path I take in order to get there. And if we lock in on a specific path, then yeah, as Monica was saying, it can get fossilized and rigid. And sometimes that's where we encounter that feeling of obstacles or limitations. Sometimes it's because life is giving us a challenge. In order to get to the mountaintop, I have to learn some lessons. But sometimes it is my own resistance to take a different path to get there. And yeah, I think this idea of being flexible is important to remember. And also tying it back to that Sabian symbol, there's such a focus here, right? The three of us were talking before we recorded about the Sabian symbol is this very focused of feeding this albatross, and there's nothing else going on. The lunar aspects are pretty much non-existent. There's either minor aspects or extremely wide orb that some people may or may not use. It's really about the conjunction and the new moon. It's very much this focus, and it just feels like how the energy in which we start the year is the energy that we are taking with us throughout the year. And I used to backpack ages ago, and we would be very strategic about what we put in our pack. Did I need it? Was it useful? Did it weigh too much? There was no taking something because I emotionally want it, need it, it's pretty. It was all about what was going to help me climb that mountain. And I think this could be a really good time to think about, what do we want to feed? What is it? Are we, feeding our fear and that's holding us back? Or are we releasing the fear and now we can partner and feed that and learn from those things and not have dread about the journey we're taking on? And I do feel like with many of the changes coming in 2025, that we're stepping back on our journey. There's been a long pause in life as many of us have been working through things that happened in 2020 and all of the processing. And it just feels to me like 2025 is getting back on our journey, whatever that journey is, and finishing that climb, that karmic mission kind of climb. And it just feels like a great way to start the year, as long as we do it with some conscious intentionality. And with that, I guess we could move on and talk about some of the aspects in the chart. The one that we were focusing on a lot in our discussion is all of the excitement around, and I use the word excitement in air quotes, about the Mars opposition to Pluto.
What Monica said about the gym was so spot on with retrograde Mars right now, to get physical form of that Mars energy, because we're having a long retrograde Mars period that started with the shadow in November, beginning of November, and is going to April until it's finally out of shadow. It's actually like a long period with working with this Mars energy, and it's also ruling the North Node. It's intense.
And Monica, you were talking earlier about it. The long period actually goes back to, was it February when we had the first conjunction between these two planets?
Yeah. Any planetary cycle can be perceived the same way we perceive the moon, the conjunction between the two planets, then the first square, the opposition between those planets, and the last square. And Pluto and Mars actually conjuncted on Valentine's this year. Then they had a square on the 11th of June. And then actually the first opposition we had on the 3rd of November, but because of the retrograde movement, we'll have now 3rd of Jan, another opposition, and then on 27th of April, another opposition. So we have 3 opposition between Mars and Pluto. It does feel significant. And again, the same way we talk about the moon, it would be interesting to go back to that Valentine's Day and see what was happening around there between the power, the anger, the powerlessness, our drives, our sex drive, and themes around that nature, and what seeds we planted back then, or on a bigger scales, what seeds were planted in the world around then, how they then were put into action around June, because that was our opening square. So that's where we take actions. And now in opposition, we should see some fruition of those themes coming through.
And I would even say that it might be good to think about what seeds were not planted, because it's Mars opposite Pluto. So what were the actions we wanted to take in February, but our fear stopped us? Where was the albatross hanging around our neck and we weren't moving forward? We weren't feeding it. We were avoiding or running or Mars is often about fight or flight, but there's a third thing called freeze. So we were either in fight, flight, or freeze rather than taking action and moving forward is another possibility that might be something that pertains to what was going on back in February. And now could be a time where we're wanting or having to take those actions or deal with the repercussions of not having done so. And we also have, if you bring in the nodes and the connection between not only Mars and Pluto being opposite, but the fact that they're making aspects to the north and the south node, you get what's often called a mystic rectangle. And Anne, weren't you looking up something about the explanation of what energy a mystic rectangle can bring?
Yeah, I was looking at a bit. I'm not that familiar with these big, or I'm not into these aspect patterns that much, but I think that the pressure of the opposition that's in with the Pluto and Mars is very significant, and that it might also maybe heighten the feeling of not being so easy to cope with things that we don't feel are right and are truthful somehow. That there's more also about the inner journey toward finding the own things, or the defining the own maybe moral codes, or what we feel is generally the right thing to do. This maybe might be something with Pluto ingressing into Aquarius too, that the structures change, or we want to have something else. But of course, when we're working with Mars Pluto energy, it's not that easy always to see it. And that might also be something that we realize much later with Pluto, because it's a process that's long.
With the mystic rectangle, we have two oppositions. We have that opposition between North Node and a South Node, and they're coming to the end of their cycle. They're coming to the end of 2.5-year cycle. They will be moving into Virgo and Pisces, which we'll speak about it in a minute. They're at the end of a long journey teaching us all about mediation and relationships and diplomacy and being hot-headed and trying to balance that. Where is it that it's good to be hot-headed and actually be assertive and put the boundaries and put your foot down? And also, where is the space? Where's the space for healthy diplomacy? Very often diplomacy without a bit of Mars is ineffective. You're not a mediator or diplomat, you're actually being a pushover. You need a little bit of that Mars and that kind of aggression to be able to put that forward. Again, Mars without that Libra, without a bit of softness and about mediation, can be a little bit too hot-headed. We've had those lessons, especially around eclipses as well, that were happening, those signs for the last 2 years, and now they're moving signs. And then we have two planets, Pluto and Mars, that are at the beginning of the signs. Mars obviously retrograding, so you'll be going in and out to the sign of Leo. Pluto just enter Aquarius. And they're also coming to that peak of their cycle where Mars is opposing Pluto. We'll do that, obviously, we'll do that 3 times, one in November, now in January, and then again in April. It just feels like there are 2 cycles that are coming together and they're linked. I'm not quite sure how to actually bite that, because we have those oppositions and then we have those beautiful trines and sextiles between them. It feels like there is a lot of potential in there. There's a lot of potential if we learn our lesson, if we actually worked with that nodal cycle, if we worked with Mars. Obviously North Node was in Aries. Working closely with Mars would have been good for the last 2 years. If we worked close with that, potentially our ambitions, the drive could actually be a very positive thing. If we haven't, there is the potential for that kind of implosion or explosion for me.
Well,
It's either the oppositions will take over or the beautiful trines and sextiles will take over, and depending on whether or not we resolve the tension to a certain extent.
I've been sitting with that idea of the nodes, since they move retrograde, being at the end of their journey, and then Mars and Pluto being at the beginning of a sign, and that energy of endings and beginnings, which to me feels very Plutonian, things ending and beginning. If I string it all together, we've been dealing with approximately 2 years of the nodes transitioning, the North Node especially transitioning through Aries. And we've been having all these discussions about the big picture. Why am I here in this lifetime? Why did I incarnate? What is my karma? What is that mountain I'm supposed to be climbing? And then that Libra energy of What is it about others that maybe has held me back or stops me or is in some way no longer serving, and that dynamic and balancing it out. And now we have this energy involving Mars, the natural ruler of Aries. And I feel like this is saying Mars at this moment in time is encouraging us to take the action steps we need. It's almost as if we have arrived at the right moment to do the work we incarnated to do. Not saying we haven't done our work up to now, but the culmination, the big picture of what all the journey thus far, the learning thus far has got us in the right position to be able to do. It's like I've learned how to walk all those steps. Now I'm ready to run that marathon. And then here comes Pluto saying, aha, but in order to do that, I have to reveal my authentic self. And there can be a whole lot of fear, not about climbing the mountain and not about the journey, but about exposing that part of ourself, of stepping into our own, whether that is self-empowerment fears or fears of being seen or exposed. And I think that with Pluto in the beginning of Aquarius, there's just going to be over the next year or so, in those first degree that it's there, massaging it, a lot of this fear about really being exposed for who I truly am around those things I've learned to keep more private or more pulled in. So I think it's an exciting time, and it can be a very explosion of goodness. Although that doesn't mean that at the same time it's not also equally terrifying.
Especially for introverts and people who are more private.
Yeah. And then this is also our last lunation with the nodes being in Aries and Libra, because on the 11th they shift into another pair of signs. So let's honor the work we've been doing over the last 2 years of aspects to the nodes and eclipses on these nodes, and recognize that it's all about to shift again. And I think Anne's going to kick us off talking about that.
Yeah, we talked about some themes of Aries and Libra, and we worked with that for a long time now. But this shift is very, very special that way, that there's such a different sign coming up. When we look at the North Node is going to move into Pisces and meet with Neptune. I think it's going to be really confusing. After this time with Aries, that this is the direction, this is what I want to do, maybe a bit too hot-headed, like Monika said sometimes. This is the line, and then we go into Pisces. And then we might feel like, okay, now I maybe want to embrace more things that's spiritual, that's emotional, that's seeing the whole picture. It's not about me anymore, it's about the universe, it's about the big picture, it's about other people. So the shift here is quite different. There are two very different signs here. So if we go to the North Node in Pisces and the South Node in Virgo are both very karmic. They're connected a lot with karmic astrology. I'm talking about combining the spiritual knowledge we have with practice. How can we get this out into the world on a practical level, the knowledge we have. But when we're talking about Virgo as a South Node, it can be a lot about what do I gain from this? What do I get? Thanks for doing. But Pisces is much more about what's the motivation, like we do in karmic astrology, the motivation behind everything you do. What's the idea? Where's the drive? Where's the compassion? Why am I doing this? Why am I going to this place? And that's more important than actual deeds or how it works out or if it's successful in the world, but more about what is my true aim for going forward on a deeper level than just looking at me, but looking at the bigger picture. So I think that the shift might be a bit like with Neptune still there. It can feel like it's not that easy to find a way, and the way is not that straight ahead that we might have thought before. That's my feeling about those.
Beautiful. And I agree. I think it's a big shift because with the Aries Libra, it's all about the outer world. What am I going to do in the world? Who am I doing it for or with? Or how will others feel about what I'm doing? It's all out there. Now the shift's going much more internal for me. I think that the highest um, kind of goal of Virgo is to serve, and Pisces is about spirit. So now we're entering in my life, how am I serving spirit? Which is beautiful sounding. However, if I haven't done the work up to now to develop a sense of connection, of integration, of belief in some type of spiritual something, whatever that might be for one, then we might have to back up and actually do that work and work on those techniques or those practices or those ideas. And if we have developed a very strong connection with spirit, but we haven't done the work around self love and self forgiveness, which to me are two very Piscean words, we may suffer imposter syndrome, suffer from thinking we're not good enough. I know I talk to a lot of clients who are like, I have this spiritual mission, but I'm not a good enough vessel yet, or they're still doing the inner self-criticism kind of route. And I think it can be very overwhelming to open up to this idea of I'm here not to create my life. I'm here to serve spirit, and how do I live my life from that point of view? And so there can be a whole lot of healing that we have to go back and step into or help assist others with over this journey. It's going to be interesting.
It is. And I think the healing can only happen if we consciously choose to do it. That's why that's the Virgo South Node for me. We need to understand that part of the healing process is letting go of what doesn't serve you. You can't be saying, I have this problem, but I'm actually contributing to it. It's understanding where that healing needs to happen. I think it was actually Hippocrates who said that before you start healing someone, ask them if they're willing to give up what makes them sick. And unfortunately, in this world that we live in, very often that's not the case. People want the happiness pill, people want the healing pill, but they're not willing to give up the lifestyle, the choices that actually contributed to make them ill. And ill as in it's as a metaphor, not necessarily all about the health. But there is this element of Virgo South Node actually teaching us, okay, this is the lesson we should have already understood. This is the lesson about discernment. This is a lesson about Virgo. What is it that serves us and what is it that doesn't? Separate chaff and wheat, and separating the grain that is good and the grain that is bad or is already rotten. This is what Virgo archetype is teaching us. It's not about being finicky and picky. It's about understanding that the small issue that has been buried or swept under the carpet, we pretend is not there, it can grow and spoil everything else. This is why we have a harvest. You don't just go, oh, that's just one bad apple, let's just leave it there, because the whole harvest can get spoiled. So you have to be very careful. You have to be very, very open to getting rid of even those small things that can cause a bigger issue in the future. And I feel if we don't learn that lesson, again, that healing has troubles, because we're trying to go into those healing waters, but we're bringing all that baggage of issues with us. I also feel with the North Node going into Pisces, it can be a lot about vision and dreams, and some of them might be way out there. The vision that we might not even see possible yet. The idea when people 100 years ago said they're a fly, and everyone was going like, yeah, you might need something, but it's fly, not humans. And here we are in a private jet or just flying the globe all over the place. I think that with the North Node in Pisces, that vision opens up, but also the depth of despair will open up as well. I think this is the place where we feel when our unconscious, collective unconscious is more porous. So I wonder if this is the time that we're stepping in when we will feel the collective pain and distress a bit more. And when I mean that, I'm not only mean about what happens in the world with different conflicts, different wars, different famines, but even what happens to the earth, that Pisces Virgo axis, even what happens to the earth. Will we feel that distress, and I'm using the word specifically, distress in our environment to our brothers and sisters in different countries? Will we feel that a bit more? And will we have to, speaking to what you're saying, Kimberly, will have to tap that healing, because ultimately to heal collective, we need to start with ourselves. We can't just say, I'm not good enough vessel. We need to heal ourselves, because that's where the healing of collective starts. So it will be one of those, you might not be good enough, but you don't have a choice. Get on with it. Get on with it. Virgo might come on, let's just do it. But yeah, like for me, North Node in Pisces can be beautiful. We always talk about a Pisces archetype as the uplifting, beautiful, loving and healing energy, but it's also the collective, the energy when we can get lost. It's the depth of the ocean with everything swimming in that depth that we're not familiar with. It's the collective that we suddenly sense and feel, and we struggle to separate what's mine, what's collective, and how do I deal with both.
I'm just going to jump in there and say that I think there's also quite a huge potentiality to jump into a lot of spiritual bypassing in the upcoming months as we adjust and get used to this shift. And I say that because for me, Pisces energy is confusing. It's the unwinding. It's like when you take a ball of yarn and it just goes everywhere. You have to let things kind of, sometimes you have to have that undoing, the unlearning, the unknowing of what has been to make space for what should be. Sometimes it's just about sitting until we allow feelings to come up. A lot of times with the Pisces energy, there's the need to release, but how can we release what we haven't allowed ourselves to experience? And in the Western world, there's a whole lot of suppressing of emotion. So this could be, as the Buddhists say, you have to sit with it until a feeling, until you no longer need to sit with that feeling. And Virgo doesn't deal with that well. Virgo sees a problem and can be, I think the mutables are extremely reactionary in that they jump into, Gemini can speak an idea before it has fully processed it in the mind. Sagittarius can run like a brush fire. Virgo jumps into reactionary when it needs to fix. It gets into fix it mode, and then boom, let's go. There's a problem, or we view something as a problem before we've allowed ourselves to see the whole picture or allow the full thing to unfold or unravel or do whatever. And so we can jump into the how do I need to fix this? How do I move forward? How do I be more spiritual? Let me get the latest pop self-help type book. I envision a whole lot of new things happening in that area of media, because it'll be the quick, as Monika was saying, I'm used to doing it quickly. Let's get the quick fix. And I think as a result, it's real easy to jump too quickly and try to bypass some of the things that might be really hard about not being coming from a linear point of view all the time. Virgo is very ruled by Gemini, very comfortable in that linear, logical side of the brain. Pisces is saying, let's embrace our unconscious, our dreamy state. Let's envision something really large. As Monika was saying, let's just make time or space. Let's just look at the clouds and daydream. Let's be artistic. And I think what could happen is I see the vision before I understand the vision I saw, or I feel it's time for a change, but I don't know what needs to change. Or I see the mountain, talking about all that Capricorn energy, but how do I get over to that mountain range when I'm still sitting by the beach? Like, I don't even know how to begin. And this, on top of all that Pluto Mars energy, could create a lot of strife where we feel pressured by ourselves or the outer world to take action, to do it now, but I'm totally afraid, and now I'm confused. And Spirit wouldn't have given us the vision or chosen us, or our higher self wouldn't have started speaking to us about this unless we were ready. So I think we are ready, but that doesn't mean it'll feel smooth. I think it could be a little bit of a rocky shifting from everything about the outer world to this inner world and what all these parts of us can mean.
I sometimes feel like spirit just goes, here we go, let's see how you deal with that. It's like,
When I was little, the way we were taught to swim, my mother signed me up for classes and did the whole right thing. My grandfather said, buoy on that. He picked me up and threw me in the pool. And that's sometimes I feel how spirit is. It's like you're ready, but it isn't a cruelness. It's you're ready. You can do this. You do have the skills. You may not think you do, but you do. And here we go. And don't worry, I'll be there to grab you if for some reason you sink. I'll be there.
The trust, and not too controlling Virgo, but the trust in that life will carry you somehow.
That's probably the most difficult lesson of Virgo Pisces axis, isn't it?
Mhm.
Where do we need to support ourselves with Virgo and make decisions, and where do we need to let go and believe in that vision?
So listening to you guys talk, inspired or remembering a scene from The Wheel of Time. I don't know if either of you have been watching it, but there's this one scene when they're braiding, this woman's come of age and she's now part of the community, and the women take her out and they're braiding her hair, and it's, as long as you have this braid, you are surrounded by us. Remember, you're never alone. You have us. It's this beautiful, warm, fuzzy kind of moment. And then they push her off a cliff into this very rapidy stream, and she's fighting and she's gulping water, and you think she's going to drown, and then she remembers like the power of the water, and she just surrenders to the current and just ride, and the current trusts what Anne was saying, trusts that the current will take her, will guide her, will bring her to the end, and then she's fine. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm not looking forward to that initial like thrust off the cliff, but I know that at the end it's going to feel really good when we get there.
Yeah. I think about it every time I'm in a pool or body of water, and I love floating. Like I love just laying on my back and just floating on top of water. And there's this trick to it. Not everyone can do it very well, just floating on top of it, because if you're too rigid, you go to the bottom. If you're too soft, you go to the bottom. It's that kind of balance between being just rigid enough but also allowing water to support you. And that for me is very much Pisces Virgo. You need to have a bit of structure. If you completely, oh, let's just go with the flow will take you where it wants and you might just not recover. When you're too rigid, the flow will break you. But it's that ability to know when. And honestly, if you can swim, if you've ever been to a swimming pool or lake or anything, if you do that, it's really interesting. Like I sometimes just try to adjust my body to see how much rigidness I can do and how quickly I can sink. And it's just a great reminder of life, really.
Yeah. So do you guys have some tips or tricks you want to share before we sign off?
It's a new moon in Capricorn. So for me, there's always one main trick for this new moon or tip for this new moon. It's setting up goals for next year. It's the new moon when you can commit. And I think what I mean by that is not like we were saying earlier on, don't choose the past, don't choose specific goals and commit to the goals. Commit to the vision. What is it that you're trying to achieve in 2025? What is it, the dream that you dreamt over the last few weeks? And put that down, journal on it, imagine yourself next year around Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever you celebrate at the end of the year, the winter solstice, and imagine being able to achieve all of that. Yes, there is a time in place to put those goals. And I think going into new year, we will be putting some of the goals, we're breaking down the year, some of us into the quarters, into the specific steps, but commit to something that you really want to achieve next year and feel that. Saturn will help you achieve that if you can feel it. If it's just next year, you'll go like, why did I bother setting up New Year resolution when they only last till like third week of January? They only last till third week of January because you only use Saturn. You didn't use the Jupiter vision there. So go mix both of them, have a journal, have a dream, and I really hope that 2025 will bring all the goodness your way.
I think that it could be good to embrace yourself for everything, all the work you did the last year, and just, for example, look at the nodes, look at where they have been moving in your chart, how much you accomplished with this era until it's gonna shift now, and just be happy with what you achieved this far. And then you can go to Monika's tip.
We're recording this when the sun is still at 29 Sagittarius. This is such a Sagittarius Thanksgiving before you move on. And that is the step that, shouldn't have been skipped.
Yeah.
100% agree.
So I'm with you. I'm on the thinking about the new year vibe energy. But for me, whenever I start planning out my new year, I always have to do a review of the prior year, right? What worked, what didn't. And I can go down a really dark rabbit hole about what didn't. And so this year, with this energy, my suggestion is thinking about that energy between Pluto and Mars, especially. With this particular lunation, I'm going to be looking at What actions did I not take last year? And it isn't about judgment of shoulda, coulda, why. What actions didn't happen last year? And of those, which ones do I still want to take? Let's think about taking those missed opportunities or those obstacles that stopped us. How do I put them on the calendar for next year? And before I do that, let's look at honoring what emotions that brings up. Is that action something that excites me, or does it scare me? Or is there a little of both? And so just having that pause to honor how it feels before we jump into the act of doing.
One more tip as well for the end of the year. I think we all say that it's really good to get yourself a new journal, whether it's a dated calendar, undated calendar, or just a journal. I feel the new year deserves its own story and all the things we can write down in our journal for new year. I feel like this is a good time to get one as a little gift to yourself. And it doesn't have to be anything expensive or elaborate. You can make it pretty with your own thoughts and quotes and drawings and stickers if you want. But it feels we start a new chapter in our lives. There is a reason we have the new beginnings, whether it's cyclical with astrology, lunar with obviously following the moon, or the yearly cycle of the sun and going into the new year as well with our calendar. So it's just a nice place to start a new chapter, metaphorically and physically, and start writing in a new journal.
And with that, wish everybody a wonderful, beautiful, joyous, enjoy feeding your albatross new year. See you back here in 2 weeks to talk about the first full moon of 2025. Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.